Closed. We are back in session. We're going to move right into our presentation, Student of the Month, with our Superintendent, Mr. Michael Brooks.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Sorry for a short delay there. Very excited each month to honor some of our wonderful students and have our staff here to help with that honor. So why don't we mix it up and start in the middle. Get our middle school principal up here and talk about your recommendation for Student of the Month.
Good evening and thank you. April is School Library Month, so it is very fitting that our Student of the Month is nominated by Maureen Stalter and Sue Weiss, our wonderful librarian and teaching assistant in the library. And next week is National Library Week. So in this month, or this year's theme is Transform Learning. So here to present our student and reintroduce our library staff, Mr. Sandmeyer.
Thank you, Mrs. Clinton. I'm very happy to be here tonight. I want to have Maureen Stalter and Sue Weiss come up and introduce Vesa Lokai as our Student of the Month. It's, again, wonderful to introduce two staff members that I've worked with in both buildings, middle school and elementary school, and, again, introduce a lovely young lady who have had the pleasure of working with her and her family through the years. So, Mrs. Stalter, you want to come on up?
Oh boy, first up. We're honored to present Vesa with the award of Student of the Month. Vesa is currently a 6th grader at Marlboro Middle School. Hi. And there she is. Some fun facts about Vesa. Her favorite book is The Secret Series by Pseudonymous Bach. Excellent choice. After school, Vesa hopes to pursue a career in teaching. Another excellent choice, Vesa. When I asked Vesa, what do you enjoy most about being a student at Marlboro Middle School, she replied, I enjoy being a student at MMS because every teacher here is nice and understanding. I like to try my best, but even if I make a mistake, I learn from it. I enjoy learning in this school because of its friendly environment. Vesa, your ability to problem solve, work independently, and determination to always succeed are what motivates me as a teacher. Your work ethic will lead to a happy life and a wonderful career. It's an honor to have you in class. Congratulations on Student of the Month.
Mr. Lawler, would you please present our high school Student of the Month?
Hey, good evening, everybody. So our Student of the Month is Josh Jennison. Josh is here with his parents, his two brothers, his sister, and his girlfriend. His mother, Cindy, works in our high school, and we're just very proud of Josh. Mr. Cortolano is also here, and we're going to have Mr. Brooks introduce him. He was a center from our football team. He's just a great All-American kid. We met for a few minutes this morning, and he's just everything that young people should be in society today, so we're really proud of him.
I've gotten to know Josh for the past 3 years at the high school through physical education as well as varsity football. A couple of remarkable things about Josh is he has a tremendous work ethic and a passion for achieving excellence. He understands and models the importance of hard work, dedication, commitment, and working as a team to achieve a goal. That's obvious through his 3 years of success as a varsity football player, not to mention What I see behind the scenes is that if he misses a lift or can't get a lift in after school, he's in the weight room during phys ed, making sure he gets it in. He is determined to improve and push his abilities to new heights as he constantly challenges himself. He sees every task and opportunity to improve upon himself that comes from a desire to be the best. He's also a very open-minded student and athlete. He views every task as a learning experience, and he makes necessary adjustments to improve upon his performance. He's a genuine, caring kid, respectful and selfless individual who always has his peers and classmates' best interests at mind. I see this every day in phys ed second period. If someone is in need of a helping hand, whether it's his classmates or the teachers, because we do have a large class at that time, he's always there to help us out. He's like an extension of the two teachers that we have on at that time. He also encourages his peers and classmates to improve every day, participate at a high level. This way they can reach their full potential. He shows a great amount of poise as he makes the most of every opportunity and never lets the situation affect him, staying confident and positive as always. Josh is a natural leader with high character who has limitless potential and a bright future ahead of him. He's also quite a badminton player. Josh, congratulations.
And Mrs. Toombs, would you please present to us the elementary student of the month?
Certainly. Good evening. Thank you, thank you. Tonight, our student of the month, on the way down here, because her and her dad came into the building upstairs, Mrs. Cameron and I asked, why do you think you got selected as student of the month? She said, because I helped Mrs. Bell in the library, and in honor of Library Month, that would be very appropriate, and it is true, but that isn't why. Perhaps one of the reasons why is because she does help many teachers and her classmates as well. But tonight, honoring her on behalf of Marlborough Elementary School will be her art teacher, Mrs. Dana Lamana. Dana and Adriana Turner, our student of the month. Come on up.
Thank you. When they asked me to think about maybe a student of the month, it's a hard choice. I see every student in the school, but Adriana stood out for that very reason, actually, Ms. Toombs, that Adriana is always there ready to give a helping hand. Not only in art class does she put in a lot of effort, but at the end of the day, I have fifth graders come down and help around the room, and Adriana is almost down there every day when she can to help out and just give supplies and just show that positive attitude, and I look forward to it. And it's definitely always nice to have a helping hand, especially as a newer art teacher. So thank you, Adriana, and congratulations.
Before we take a quick break and let people that need to bring their children home for the evening and we get into our budget presentation and safe routes to school presentations, I wanted to make note of one important item on the agenda tonight that anybody that leaves early will not have an opportunity to witness. It's very rare in, I think, any school district that you have the opportunity to have someone with you for the better part of 4 decades. Most of it with our school district. So this evening, during our personnel actions, we will be accepting a resignation of our elementary school principal, Mrs. Marie Toombs. So we would like to thank Mrs. Toombs for her service I'd like to wish her well in her retirement. We'll have many, many more meetings over the next 2 months to say proper goodbyes, but we thought it important to make that one note before everybody has an opportunity to go home. So, again, thank you. With that, we'll take our 2-minute break. Anybody that needs to bring their children home for the evening may do so now. We will continue in 2 minutes with our superintendent report and our presentations for the evening. Okay.
So this looks very simply, it's got a little
Oh, we're going to do that
better
first?
laser. Oh, it's getting a
All right,
little
we're gonna
faint.
do public
Let's
comment
make
on the
sure it
agenda
reads, okay, that's good. So just right and left. Just like
Before we continue with the meeting and have our public comment on the agenda items for the evening, we would like to recognize the presence of 2 elected officials, our town supervisor, Mr. Al Lanzetta, and Councilman Baker. Thank you for joining us tonight. At this time, we will be taking any questions or comments from the public on our agenda items for the evening. Does anybody have any questions or comments on tonight's agenda? Any questions, comments on the agenda? With that, we will move on to our superintendent's report. Mr. Michael Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. My report is very abbreviated today because we have a number of important items to get to. We have 2 presentations tonight. One is a collaborative committee, the resolution of a collaborative committee between the school district and the town and the county regarding a program called Safe Routes to Schools. So I'll introduce that presentation in just a moment, Brian. But many of the members that were working on that committee are here tonight. So as we get through the presentation, perhaps we can recognize those people that are with us tonight and the role. But it was really a wonderful collaboration between the school district, the town, and the county to come up with something that really has some promise for the future. So I'm looking forward to that presentation. We also have our budget presentation tonight for the 2016-2017 school year that will present to the Board of Education our proposal for their consideration and debate to be approved at our next board meeting for the voters to vote on at May 17th. With that, one small announcement. This will go out in a much more broad format, but we are making a small change to commencement time for the high school. Right now, it's on, or it was on the calendar, that we were going to have the rain date for graduation Saturday evening at 6 o'clock. We're actually going to be changing that to Saturday morning at 10 o'clock in the morning. And Mr. Lawler will put that announcement out through our alert system so that everyone is aware of it, and it'll be on his communications going forward. We feel that's a better way to approach commencement makeup. There won't be any rain this year, so don't worry. But in the case that there is going to be rain, it'll be on Saturday morning. That way families can have the afternoon and evening for their family parties. So, with that, I am going to ask for Brian Slack to come to the microphone and begin his presentation on the Marlboro Safe Routes to Schools Action Plan.
Thank you, Superintendent. And thank you, members of the board, for your time this evening. I promise I'll be brief in our remarks. I'm very pleased to present to you this evening the Marlboro Safe Routes to School Action Plan. As the superintendent said, my name is Brian Slack. I'm Principal Transportation Planner for the Ulster County Transportation Council and the Ulster County Planning Department based in Kingston, and of course we represent all of Ulster County. Among the various responsibilities that we have working at the Transportation Council, they include managing federal transportation dollars, including large projects that come into Ulster County, including road, bridge, trail projects, as well as transit projects as well. But we also are in charge of fostering a dialogue on the issues of transportation, be they transit, congestion, road safety, or bicycle and pedestrian safety and access to facilities and resources, transportation resources. Several years ago, the members of our board, which include every elected official in Ulster County, highest elected officials of municipalities in Ulster County, they approached us and asked us, in our role in facilitating a dialogue on transportation, would we please address the issue of Safe Routes to School? Safe Routes to School is a national program. It's a planning framework, and it's also a grant program that's administered by the Federal Highway Administration that provides millions of dollars on a regular basis to municipalities to make the routes for walking and biking to school safer for children, and to encourage children to walk and bicycle to school. The Safe Routes to School planning framework is what we're going to be talking about tonight. It's an excellent framework for addressing a wide variety of issues that really are not just germane to Safe Routes to School. I think they're really germane to community development and community improvement, and basically building a better community and improving our neighborhoods. Walkable communities that encourage healthy activities and movement around your community without having to rely on a vehicle is something I think we should all strive for, particularly in higher density urban areas or even hamlet areas like Milton and Marlboro and our surrounding areas. And I think the Safe Routes to School planning framework is an excellent way to accomplish that. In so doing, we partnered and collaborated with Alta Planning and Design. They're a engineering and consulting firm based in Saratoga. And Lindsay Zefting is here with me tonight. Lindsay Zefting Vera is a licensed engineer, professional engineer, and has a master's in urban planning from SUNY Albany. And she has worked on probably hundreds of Safe Routes to School action plans throughout New York and the region over her career. And she has been working with us on the Safe Routes to School project. We've worked with 4 other municipalities in Ulster County to date. Marlboro is the last municipality. We're really glad we could squeeze it in before the contract closed with Alta. We've also worked with New Paltz, Saugerties, Town of Lloyd, and Shawangum throughout this, what has become a 2-year project. I think it's very beneficial. There's some really good recommendations in here that focus not just on the physical landscape of your community, things like sidewalks and crosswalks, but also encouragement. How can you really encourage your students and your parents to increase walking and bicycling to their schools. There's a wide range of recommendations, everything from very basic, what some of us would probably consider to be common sense recommendations, all the way up to really more elaborate recommendations that would require a lot of cooperation between the town, the Department of Transportation, and the school district and the community. Many of the recommendations are conceptual in nature. They're really intended to encourage a dialogue about how we can perhaps go after a grant funding source, what we might do to get that grant, and what we might focus on with those funds. So I'm not going to introduce it any further. I'll let Lindsay go into the details of the plan, and I'll also circulate copies of the draft.
Great. Thank you, Brian. So I'm just going to briefly walk through the plan, and I'll open the floor to any questions that you might have afterwards. So this is the same framework that we used for all 5 of the same action plans, looking at existing conditions and then going through proposals. And as Brian alluded to, we're not just looking at infrastructure. So there are 5 E's to Safe Routes to School. There's the engineering, so that's looking at the infrastructure, the sidewalks, but also looking at those encouragement programs, the educational programs, enforcement, as well as evaluation of how those programs are going so that they can be improved upon in the future. So just looking at the existing conditions, both the elementary, we did focus on the elementary and the middle school as part of this action plan. With the campuses being so close together, we included them in one action plan. So there's really no school speed zone along Route 9W, so we identified that as an existing condition. There is the crossing guard that's there for the middle school when they're exiting. There's a lack of bicycle parking at both schools, lack of sidewalk access to some of the schools. There are some available crosswalks, particularly across 9W, so that's just identifying the existing conditions. We mapped all of the existing conditions within looking at pedestrian routes, bus routes, as well as the parent pickup and drop-off. It being about 20% of the students getting to school by parent pickup and drop-off. That's very important to consider those conflicts as you're trying to increase the number of students that are walking and biking. Then we looked at an entire mile radius essentially around the school. That tends to be a common distance that's comfortable for kids, especially at the middle school, to be able to walk and bike. So we focused on that 1 mile radius. And the inner circles are the half mile, the outer circles are the 1 mile radius from the school, so you can get an idea of the distance. Getting into the recommendations, so like I said, we broke this down into the 5 E's. So as far as the physical improvement, focusing on the engineering recommendations, we made a lot of recommendations for sidewalk improvements, filling a lot of the gaps, focusing the priorities on connecting the adjacent neighborhoods directly to the school and then branching out from there. We identified a number of new crosswalks as well as raised crosswalks, combines traffic calming as well as the crosswalk features. So we identified a few locations for those. We also identified a network of bicycle facilities. So as kids are more comfortable, particularly in the middle school, at the middle school, biking to school, we wanted to make sure that those routes were identified and were also safe. Bike boulevards, if anyone's not familiar with that term, is a combination of a shared road along with traffic calming. So it's really what they call a family-friendly street or a neighborhood greenway. So it's combining those features to be a really bicycle-friendly roadway. Identified some routes for bike lanes as well as shared lane markings, directly leading to the school, but again, as Brian said, this would really be a complete streets plan for the entire community. It just has the school as a focus. Also made recommendations for bicycle parking at the schools. We expect that there would be more need at the middle school than the elementary school, but it'd be ideal to have it at both and available. Some of the other recommendations we made were for shared use paths. So we did identify some trail opportunities within the community that would directly link to the schools. School zone signage, and then we also did focus, particularly at the middle school, on some ways to improve the campus circulation. So there's a lot of conflict right now between students exiting and entering the school, parents picking up and dropping off, drivers trying to just get through the campus and out to Route 9W, as well as the buses coming and going during pickup and drop-off. So we did recommend some short-term improvements as well as some long-term improvements for how to potentially work on improving that circulation at the school. And then we also recommended some educational and supportive programs, things like participating in Walk to School Day and Bike to School Day. Bike to School Day will be happening that first week of May. So just even starting with those types of yearly events can really start to encourage and also ease parent fears of, okay, if they can do it one day, they can start to do it the next day and once a month or once a week, and just start building that support for the program. So this is the map of all of the recommendations, and this is actually boiled down to our priority. So what we did is we identified 11 priority projects. So it isn't, just build it all at once. We'd all love to build it tomorrow, but we all know the funding isn't available for that quite yet. So we wanted to make sure that we're providing you with really a list of priorities. So this is how we broke that out. And just those listed out. Priority number 1 as well as priority number 2 has been pretty consistent throughout all of our action plans. In order to really implement something like this, you need a driver. So identifying that Safe Routes to School facilitator and really instituting that initial basic education is incredibly important. And we really built the foundation of a Safe Routes to School task force with the steering committee, which had members of the school board, as well as the town. So continuing that task force to really continue the work we've started and moving that forward, applying for grants and incorporating these into the school programs is incredibly important. Side path along Route 9W that we identified, so you've got safe movement along Route 9 for both pedestrians as well as cyclists, was identified as our priority recommendation number 3. 4 was, again, that encouragement, so participating in International Walking and Bike to School Day. Number 5 was just our first set of filling in some of those sidewalk gaps, which you'd see back on that map. And then implementing the bike racks was our priority route number 6, and we went down to essentially 11 priority recommendations. But there's a lot of recommendations in the plan itself, but we identified these as the top. So, in a nutshell, that is the Safe Routes to School Action Plan. So are there any questions, or Brian, did you have anything?
Let me just say, in closing, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the wonderful assistance that we got from the members of the Marlboro community, including members of the board. Michael and his staff, the principals, and many others participated in this project. We had the best turnout that we've ever seen. Members of the town and the town board and citizenry, Jim Garofalo, all of the members that participated in this project are listed on the inside cover, and they were very instrumental in providing us with the information we needed, the background, because we don't live in Marlboro. We may pass through it from time to time. I'll probably be doing more work in Marlboro with the supervisor and the town board in the years to come. But these projects really require local insight and local champions, and the town and the school really stepped up better than we've ever seen, and we really thank you for that. It was a real pleasure to work with the town and school in Marlboro. So going forward, the Transportation Council, unfortunately we don't always have Lindsay's assistance, but the Transportation Council is always just a phone call away. We'll be working with the town on some other planning projects, I'm sure, in the very near future, focusing on the 9W corridor. You have a 70-page document in front of you. It's a lot to absorb. I'm sure if you have detailed questions, we're happy to try to answer them for you tonight, but the document is hosted. It's on our website now, and the link is listed on the inside of the document, and we can leave a few extras for members of the public. But if you do have any questions, we're happy to try to answer them for you right now.
There's a Bike to School Day. It's an international sponsored event. So schools across the entire country opt to participate and encourage they'll either have events at the school teaching kids how to bike and bicycle skills or encouraging kids to bike to school.
Considering we're just presenting the draft plan to the board tonight for the first time, I wouldn't expect a groundswell immediately. I think it takes time for a lot of these events to be organized.
Is there any aspect of it that can be implemented in time for that day? In other words, I'm wondering if I'm going to be here watching a bunch of kids get ready.
At this point, we're just hoping it's not going to snow on May 1st.
Yes, assuming the weather holds out.
So certainly it's premature for us to begin a program like that because there are some issues regarding some of our transportation corridors and the ability to walk and ride to some of the schools. So that certainly was the main focus of this group. So great question, but that's the purpose of this, is to start the process to address that issue.
That's right.
Yeah, particularly with biking, it's going to be key to identify the particular safe routes and develop those safe routes. So I think next year to start something like that is more achievable.
And it's taken a number of years. Like the city of Kingston has had a number of programs working with a variety of ad hoc organizations and the YMCA and partnerships that they've been fostering for years to get these things up and running. It takes time, and it takes the human resources and that human capital in order to coalesce a real strong program. And it takes the dialogue, and we really hope that this document will begin to foster that dialogue tonight.
Sure. Mike, could you now comment this interest has been in Marlboro as you maybe the town board started?
Actually, one of the primary characters in this, I believe, was Howard and also Susan Horton, who's not present with us tonight at the board. If you recall, back in the early part of the fall, Susan wanted to really get on board with this planning process and was the one that kind of spearheaded it from the board perspective, and it launched from there. Certainly would like to sing Susan's accolades. She's away at some family business tonight, but she was a key driver early on.
And James has been talking about this for several years when he's come to meetings, and it's finally caught on. The community's been pushing it, and there's finally enough people and a means to do the report. So it's definitely not brand new, but the funding mechanism, the work with the town, and the real push from the community, I think made a big difference.
Sure.
I think in the last couple of years we've worked more closely with the Ulster County Transportation Council. Members of our board do attend those meetings, and we have heard of this before. I think Mrs. Lanzetta deserves some credit also for, I'm not sure who she connected with first, but that was the first I heard of that possibly being something here in Marlboro. But I want to thank Brian and Lindsay for this report. I think it's very well done. It cost us nothing. Of course, it cost somebody something, but it didn't cost the town. And I mean, if you read through it, it does have recommendation. It has costs. They're prioritized. Next steps. It's very thorough, I think. And for us as a town board, we will continue to work with the Transportation Council. We have a 9W corridor study coming up. That was a grant that we're going to work with Brian's team on. We think this will help us on another grant, local park revitalization project that we're working on. We, as a town board, realize that our sidewalks in the hamlets of Milton or Marlboro are not what they should be. And we have a small pot of money to try to address that this year, but it's a very small pot. So something like this, this study will help us go after more grant money, we feel, in the future. And again, Brian is going to keep his eyes and ears open in that regard. There is federal money that becomes available for this type of thing, sidewalk implementation, improvement, and so forth. So we really appreciate the work you've done from a town board perspective as well. I know Supervisor Lanzetta does as well. So anyway, thank you.
It was our pleasure, and we really hope that in the months and years to come that the town will be able to graduate from the planning stage, more into the implementation stage. And, yeah, yeah.
Monies to come in to do all this good stuff. Unfortunately, that's not the case right now. We've done a lot of great plans in the past and now in the future. So it's it's to get the money to do those projects, right?
This was an important first step.
It is.
Important
It's always
first step.
I just want to thank Brian and Lindsay. When they first came out with the report, I took the report, I chicken scratched all over it, sent it back to them. When they came out with the revisions, I sent them another 10 pages, and a lot of the revisions got made into that. At the end of this meeting, I'll talk about some of the other things, but I certainly would like to thank them for putting up with me, because I am very picky about stuff, and try to keep everybody on the ball. But I thank them very much for looking over all of my stuff. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jim. You have a real asset here in your own backyard in Jim Garofalo, and the level of knowledge and time that he's willing to commit to these subjects is really valuable, invaluable.
Good question. So it seems, this might be obvious, but it sounds like this is almost a handoff to the town and the school district on, here's your plan, now you guys go figure out how to implement it, funding, prioritization, et cetera. Is that true? Can you confirm that? And secondly, does the Transportation Council, what's your role in this going forward? Do you have some advisory role or facilitation role of any sort going forward?
Good questions. It certainly is a handoff. These projects, whether it's planning or implementation or encouragement at the local level, they live and die by the local champion. They require the local champion. This is not something that an outside entity can come in. We can provide some guidance, and we feel we did provide some solid guidance and some ways and ideas to get you started. But at the end of the day, it's really up to the community to take the bull by the horns and decide what's right for them. Is it, working on a sidewalk grant? It's always best to work on look for small wins first and build up to something larger. I know the town has really been struggling with fits and starts with the federal aid process. Will they have a large reconstruction project on 9W? It's here one day, it's gone the next. That's really frustrating, I know, for the town. It's frustrating for the council. So hopefully it's something that they can work up to, and when someday there will be some major work done on 9W, I suspect. It happens sooner or later. And when that comes, you'll have some really good ideas in this document and in a number of other planning documents in order to build the facility that's right and best and works best for the town. In terms of the second part of your question, I'm the principal transportation planner for Ulster County. I'm a phone call away to offer insight and assistance. We're small staff, there's 2 of us, and we can provide a lot of data on crash statistics, on volume. We work very well as a liaison between the department, the locals, the Department of Transportation, and the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration as well. We work really closely with UCAT and Kingston City Bus too. So we're a good resource, and I'm on a first-name basis with these guys. We work well together, and we'll continue to do that. So I'll provide whatever assistance I can.
And I'll just add in that the encouragement and the educational components are typically very low cost, if not no cost, items to start implementing. Those have to be done really on the school level, and like Brian was saying, have that local champion, whether that's being by principals, the school board, or even parents, high school students. You can get everyone involved, but that's something that can be started pretty quickly.
Well, that may be an area like, I know as we get towards the end of the year, we usually bring in, and I know we've had the fire trucks and the police vehicles and the divers and all kinds of stuff. We could do something with bike safety. The police departments have done that in the past, and then maybe that's something we can, as we work towards folking. And there's a big push for Fit Day and the things that everybody's doing. So trying to incorporate the bike safety maybe this year at the middle and the elementary school.
Yeah.
Would be a great step in that direction.
There are a lot of good ideas in this document. Take some time to flip through it, and I think it might lead you into some interesting directions and resources. The Health and Safety Institute at Ulster County Community College, they offer education outreach in terms of bike safety and traffic safety, and they're a resource that you can turn to locally. They're pulled pretty thin as well these days. Everybody's resources belts are tight, but there are a lot of different directions that you can go in. But it really, I want to emphasize again, it really requires that human capital and interest to step up to the table to be successful.
There was actually a program that was done at Middle Hope Elementary School for a number of years. I believe it was fourth grade. Was it fourth grade?
No, they still did it when
Or
it was
th-
the bicycle rodeo.
Yeah.
Like you said, and you've alluded to in our meetings, it is a solid program with protocols and training that has to occur.
Probably a little much for doing it at the elementary school now, but it might be worth something to explore at private events like Fit Day or. That was a great program. I mean, it's where my son learned to ride his bike. They took the pedals off and he coasted until he was comfortable, and then they put the pedals on. There was a big assembly. They brought in people from the bicycle safety expert organization who taught everybody like proper putting on your helmet and what could happen if you don't. It's a great program, and those are things I think we could probably look at executing in-house. Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Clicker works. Good. All right, good evening. We are here to present tonight our final superintendent's presentation and recommendation for the 2016-2017 budget. Just to rehash a couple of quick items. First of all, there was a foundation for our building of the 2016-2017 budget, and it was focused on two specific areas, one academic, the other economic, supporting academic performance and growth, and looking at our long-term financial health. That was the key stalwarts to the formation of this budget. And tonight really represents the final culmination of that process. The board takes up the discussion and deliberation and debate of this final package after we finalized a couple of variables, very big ones, so we can present an economic piece to you. Friday last week, the state adopted a statewide budget, and in that process, school districts find out how much aid they will be getting for the next school year. That was the biggest variable in our process. There are certainly still a couple of small variables that are out there that we hope to have resolved within the next couple of weeks, but they are very small at this point. And the Board of Education also had a goal committing to managing the finances entrusted by the taxpayers and also reviewing our academic programs and committing to excellence. So those are certainly the key pieces in this process. Back a few weeks ago, we presented the potential for some academic enhancements to address the academic side. We also presented to the Board of Education and the public a restructuring of a number of positions that has already begun in current year and will continue on into the 2016-17 school year that we will not present on tonight because they're budget non-impactful. They are neutral items. These are other items that do have budgetary impact. So certainly we looked at a series of positions, and I put them into this slide presentation so we can refer back to them if we need to during debate and discussion. So that's my brief introduction. I'm going to pass everything off so that we can get into the finer details of the economic side, which is the piece that we really haven't had a lot of time to explore. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Patrick.
Thank you. So we talked about this piece a little bit earlier in the year. We did have to set our tax, we had to report our tax levy to the comptroller's office, and we are, for the second year in a row, seeing a reduction in the tax levy. And as everybody's aware, the tax levy is the portion of our funding that we collect from all the residents within the school district. So that's your school tax bill, is our tax levy. Because of the mechanics of the tax cap calculation, we see a reduction of about $37,506 in our levy compared to last year, and that is a 0.11% decrease. So again, I think you'd be very hard-pressed to find other school districts that have seen 2 consecutive years of reductions in their tax levy. So just to recap some of our major cost drivers, these are still approximate. Salaries, payroll, ERS, TRS, approximately $320,000. We had some savings on ERS and TRS that offset some of the contractual increases in salary and associated payroll expenses. Health insurance, about $300,000. Debt service is going to be down a little bit because we did refi that high school or elementary school 2006 project debt that saved us estimated $1.8 million over the next 12, 13 years. Small increase in transportation, budgeted increase, BOCES $400,000, and then some program enhancements at about $480,000. So our proposed budget this year, and the way we're going to look at this, there's actually 3 pieces. There's our budget, we have the Smart Schools Bond Act, and we also have an adult ed piece that we're going to cover a little bit earlier. But first we just want to talk about expenditures, school district spending on school district program. So right now the proposed expenditure total, $53,661,131. It's an increased budget to budget of about 2.85%. But again, noticing the piece that we're asking from the public as reducing by about $37,000, a 0.11% reduction. So just to look at our revenue for 16-17, to make up our corresponding side to our expenditures, our estimated state aid, $13,007,368. Miscellaneous revenues are up a little bit. We'll look at that in a minute. The tax levy, as previously discussed. The Dan Scammer pilot payment, estimated about $1.2 million, just under. And proposed use of fund balance and reserves, $4.35 million. We're going to talk about that in a little bit too. But collectively, those equal our offsetting revenue of $53,661,131. So to take a little bit of a deeper look at the revenue, yes, we got an increase in aid, but we also have a decrease in aid. Last year, we received what we're calling emergency aid. It was our prior year adjustment money, but we have factored that into our long-term plan. In 13-14, we had $4 million. 14-15, we had $4 million emergency aid provided by Senator Larkin and Assemblyman Skartatos. This year, we received $3.2 million in prior year adjustment money. Again, all of those pieces trying to fill that hole from the massive restructuring with the bankruptcy of the Dynegy power plants. So what we saw is we're losing the $3.2 million that we received this year. We have an increase in aid of about $1.2 million. So the net of that is an overall decrease in aid of approximately $2 million. Now we do I know the newspaper reported that increased aid number is higher than that. A portion of that is building aid, We were at a seminar earlier by Questar State Aid Planning earlier in the year, and they had cautioned us to really be wary if you can't point to any justifiable reason why you're receiving more building aid, be skeptical of whether that number is actually going to be real or not. So we did make further inquiries with Questar on our specific case. They came back and said that they can't see any real justification. So right now, we're not going to plan on receiving that money. If we do receive that money, that will obviously offset some of the planned fund balance and reserves. But as of right now, that's not something that we're going to anticipate because we doubt the validity of that calculation. So we see a little bit of a drop, which is good because we knew we were going to have a hole, right? We knew we were going to be $3.2 million short. That's reduced now to about $2 million hole. Hopefully, our projection is next year we should see another significant bump in aid. And keep in mind, these significant bump in aids, they're because we lost so much value in our district. When you compare us to the neighboring districts, it seems like we've got a huge increase, which we did, but we were planning on it. We were actually planning on it being slightly higher than what we wound up getting because we went from basically in 12-13, the district's valuation was approximately $1.9 billion. It now rests at about $1.3 billion. So we lost about a third of the value of all the properties in the district. That's fairly unheard of, right? We're used to incremental changes, right? We have a slight increase, a slight decrease. You're not used to seeing the value of a school district drop by 33% in 1 year. And unfortunately, the tax cap, it's not designed to deal with that type of situation because it's really the exception, not the rule. But we've been planning for this for a number of years. We've known it's coming, and now it's here. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we plan to deal with it going forward. And that 4.35 number might look a little bit high. The last time we looked at our long-term projection, we anticipated receiving about $1.59 million in new aid. You see we got 1.2, and we were going to use about $3.9 million of reserves. If we take the difference between the anticipated and what we received, add it to the 3.9, we're only about $77,000 off of what we projected we would be. Unfortunately, that $381,000 is coming out of reserves and fund balance instead of additional state aid. So we estimated what the tax rate would be. And again, this is an estimate. We're using last year's values. We're using last year's equalization rates because those numbers haven't been published yet. But this should be pretty close, about a 3.21% increase in the tax rate. Now, it's important to realize we have a reduction in the levy, but the rate's going up, right? Logic would dictate if we're collecting less money from the community, your tax rate should drop. Unfortunately, we are still dealing with the Roaston devaluation. That continues on for another, I believe, 4 years. This year, from last year to next year, this year to next year, it's dropping almost $15 million in taxable assessed value, which equates to about $40 million worth of true value within the district. So that would be, $41 million houses burning up in, a day, essentially. We also wanted to point out that way back in February of 2014, when we first saw what was happening with Dynegy, and when we saw the court set orders, we saw the bankruptcy proceedings, at that point we projected what we expected tax rate increases to be solely based on the effect of the Roaston devaluation, and we had actually projected that we would see a 3.12% increase in taxes this year, and we're projecting a 3.21%, so pretty close. Obviously there are variables, the values of the towns change, the equalization rates change over those periods of years, but we're pretty darn close to where we thought we were going to be. And this is that slide from back in the beginning of 2014 where we estimated the numbers. So you can see 16, 17, 312. These numbers in 15, 16 wound up a little bit better than we anticipated. We're going to see that next. That was the year the dance scammer pilot kicked into effect. It had an effect on the way we calculate the tax cap and the impact on the rate increase. When we first developed this projection, there was no talk of any pilot agreement on the dance scammer plan. So, but we will see when we look at the historical rates, what we've been through, and this is really since the bankruptcy of the power facilities. So 13-14 and 14-15, collectively between those 2 years, we lost over $9 million in levy revenue that came from the power plants was shifted to the homeowners. So that's where we saw those massive increases due to the rapid devaluation of those facilities. 15-16, we saw a little mitigation from what we thought was going to be 2.81%, was actually closer to 1%, 1.25% between Marlboro, Plattekill, and Newburgh. And then we have our projected at 3.21. Now it's important to realize that that is 100% solely the result of the devaluation of the roasting facility. That's why we see 3.21% there. If that facility stayed equal in its value, you would expect to see a decrease in that number. And it's also important to note that there is absolutely nothing that we can do to stop this from happening. We could, whatever we did this year to reduce that number just pushes it to next year. So it really has to be absorbed. It's at least now at a lower rate of decline, which makes it a little bit more palatable as we look at how it impacts our rates going forward. We also did want to highlight, again, for the second year in a row, because we're recommending a decrease in the levy, a contingent budget, if we were to fail in the budget vote, you have the potential of freezing that levy at 0. And if we were to do that, you would see a slightly higher projected increase of about 3.32% if we were to keep that levy exactly what it was last year. So this is just a chart to illustrate back to the 07-08 through the projection for next year. The bars represent our levy in actual dollars. The top line is the Newburgh tax rate. The bottom lines are Marlboro and Plattekill. They converge in 11-12 and pretty much stay the same after that. But as you'll see, from the 12-13 to 13-14 school year, we saw a 15% drop in the tax levy. Now, in a normal world, you would see a corresponding drop in the tax rates. Again, due to the bankruptcies, we wound up seeing a 15% increase in the rate. So you have a 15% drop in the levy, and the rate goes up to 15%. We saw a small increase in our levy in 14-15, the reduction last year, and then the reduction this year. And as you can see, the line kind of starts to flatten out there as we see just the roast and devaluation drive those numbers up slightly. So how does this affect us long term? That's the big question, because from the time I've got here, I've heard concern that there was never, or there was not forward planning, and whether there was or there wasn't, it wasn't presented publicly so that everybody could understand where we are. So we project at the end of this year, between reserves and fund balance, we should have about $10.6 million. And we knew this was coming. We knew this day would be here, and we've been bolstering our reserves and fund balance in anticipation of being where we are today, so that we could hopefully get through the worst of this process, and then eventually, someday, we'll be talking about a stable economic environment for the district. Based on using the 4.35 million that we recommended, we'll see a drop. Now, it's important to realize we always, and we've talked about this many times, our target is 96% of our budget, right? We know we have to have 4% of contingent money. If we get a family that moves in with a very high-need special education child, that could easily be $100,000, $200,000 right off the top. We get new placements, we have to provide transportation. That's sound budgeting, and it's something that I would be very, very hesitant to reduce that any further. So when you say we're applying $4.35 million in reserves and fund balance, realize about $2 million of that is our contingent money, right? So we're not going to see, in actual expenditures, we're not going to see that $4.3 million drop off. As we talked about previously, last year we started that process by applying $1 million worth of reserves that we anticipate being there at the end of the year. And we had to tax for the other million part of it. So going forward, we're now applying all of the house money, so to speak, against the contingency, and we'd expect that 4% to be available, 3.5%, 4% at the end of the year. So what this does is we project it out through 21, 22. Now keep in mind, the further we go out, the less reliable the numbers are, because the more changes between now and then. But it doesn't take us out, which is the important thing to know. You know, if these numbers, in 2021, at our lowest point, we still have 4% of our fund balance, and we have just under $1 million worth of reserves. So, and then in the 21-22 school year, we drop $1.2 million worth of debt, which is the tax cert payment that we have for, what was it, Central Hudson. We've been paying on that every year. That's the year that $1.2 million drops off, and that's a bottom line. $1.2 million worth of expenses disappears. In 2021, we lose $500,000 in debt payment. That's related to an older construction project. So as you see in 2021, just about the time we're bottoming them out is about the time that we're starting to shed some of this debt that's been really kind of shackling us for a number of years now. So that's why you see after that 2021 school year, we start to turn the corner, and we anticipate that we, at that point, should be able to start building reserves again. Now, is this concerning? Absolutely. Everybody, we all should be concerned, because we need to see what our state aid numbers are going to look like next year, because that's going to definitely impact how we go forward. But we also have a brand new superintendent who is now really starting to get a good understanding of the operations of the district, and he's got some great ideas on how we might be able to implement some cost-saving measures as we move into next year. So we have two things to look at: what's our aid package going to look like next year, and what's our expenditures going to look like? Are we going to be able to work organically to reduce some of those anticipated expenditures? But the good news is, we don't see this, at no point right now in our projection do we see us getting down to where we start to eat into our 4% fund balance, which we're allowed legally to maintain. So that's a good thing, right? The Dynegy bankruptcy has been difficult for everybody. It's been difficult for the community. It's difficult for us, and we're going to continue to deal with that difficulty, for the next 5 or 6 years. And then I'm very, very hopeful that by the time my kids get into high school, everything calms down a little bit around here. And we also have the possibility for these power plants for those values to increase over time. The Dan Scammer facility has a 5-year pilot agreement. Once that expires, it should go to a market rate. The assessor in Newburgh has been removed from his position. So we may have a good chance that we actually see a value that actually reflects what that property is worth. So moving on to the second piece, that's all just budget. What we also have to add in this year is the Smart Schools Bond Act money. So what this is, back in the fall of 2014, was it? At the general election, there was a referendum in New York State whether New York State issues debt to support technology initiatives for school districts. And that passed, and we have an allocation of about $1.07 million. We plan to start spending that money next year, and when we spend that money, we'll get reimbursed for that money that we spend, dollar for dollar, based on tech plan approved purchases. So right now, we're anticipating that we're going to spend about $750,000 in infrastructure upgrades and devices, and then we should see an offsetting $750,000 in additional revenue. And Mike, do you want to talk about a little bit about that?
Thank you, Pat. Just wanted to update the board and the community that we're kind of coming to the closing end of our central office planning around the Smarter Schools bond. There is still some due diligence to work with some of our staff in the buildings and also some hearing, and Mr. Brooks is well aware of that. So those are in the near future for us. But some of the things that we had originally talked about have changed a little bit. Originally, when we were talking about our Smarter School Bond application, we included things like wireless for the buildings and updating that. However, Mr. Brooks came in and saw that that was really a larger need and a more immediate need, and we were very fortunate that the Board of Education gave us some additional resources this year to address those needs, specifically at Marlboro Elementary School and Marlboro High School. So those things have been completed. So we talked about what would replace those items, and it is actually more of a communications plan than anything, but replacing our current phone system, which is really reaching the end of life, and the appliances, the phones in classrooms and offices are really starting to degrade at this point, but replacing that with a really updated IP phone system. I really call it a communication system because these new IP systems and the communications tools they offer really lend themselves to a safer campus, being able to communicate more effectively with people internal in the building and external in the building. So you're going to see a component of that in the Smarter Schools bond application, as well as some items that were still existing that we knew were needs in the middle school wiring project, because we really haven't addressed that building. We've worked with a consultant in Anise and Associates who works closely with Orange Ulster BOCES, and they've kind of reviewed some of these items. So we'll be talking more about that further, but I think one of the bigger components of this, and one of the major changes, you'll see some of the percentages have changed, is what this is going to do for teachers and students and learning in general. We're really going to look to increase those devices. But to speak more specifically to that, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Robin Hecht.
So what Mike is alluding to is that with the increase of the technology, our classrooms are going to be more interactive. So students are going to be giving that opportunity where they can begin to obtain those 21st century skills, those STEM skills that are going to make them ready for employment. At the same time, teachers are going to be using collaborative tools, which we've already begun to start to train teachers on Google Apps and Google Classroom, Flipped Classroom, blended learning. It goes on and on and on. Those tools are also going to increase the collaboration and the communication that we have with parents, students, teachers, and the community. So it's quite a huge task. Some of the devices that we're talking about, tablets, iPads, Chromebooks, these are also devices that are going to make us able to differentiate the curriculum and the instruction in the classroom so that we're going to be able to address all students' needs specifically.
Thank you. So we are going to see added in a couple of minutes, we're going to see $750,000 added to the budget. We're going to see $750,000 added as an expected revenue. As we get to the summary, and before we go through the numbers real quick, we're also facing the same situation with adult education. We've historically run adult education through a trust and agency fund. This past year, our auditors told us that we needed to move those operations over to the general fund, which again is not a huge deal because right now the program is self-sustaining. So we are going to be adding in an expense of $20,000 to run adult education, but we'll also be adding on the other side revenues of $20,000 from people taking adult education courses. So when we add our proposed budget, our adult education expenses, and our Smart Schools Bond Act money, we come up with a total budget of $54,431,131, and you can see what the corresponding revenue breakdown is. Also, what's going to be on this year's ballot is going to be a proposition to establish a capital reserve. The capital reserve, as we talked about previously, is limited in duration, amount, and purpose. The specific language that the voter should see on the back of the ballot is listed after the capital reserve, but it is, right now, we're going to propose a 10-year lifespan for the reserve, a maximum funding level of $10 million. Voter authorization is required to create the reserve and also to spend the reserve. And this has absolutely no tax impact to homeowners. There'll be no additional monies included in the levy to fund this. What happens at the end of the year when we're looking at what our operation was and how much money we have left over, we'll be able to make decisions about, is it appropriate to put some money away. And again, this comes to the long-term planning aspect. We know we've had significant capital projects in the past, and we know what the impact of carrying that debt is, and how that affects us and our ability to basically adjust to changing environments. It very much restricts that ability. So what our hope is that when we do have additional money left over, we can start putting that money into a reserve so that when it comes time to do a significant renovation project, when the roofs go bad, when the building condition survey returns a condition that is a serious health or safety violation or concern for students or staff, that we're not going to have to issue debt necessarily, or we're going to be able to significantly reduce the amount of debt that we issue because we'll have local funds that we've been essentially creating an emergency reserve for, just like your home, just like on vacation. You always have a little bit of extra money for those things that happen that you couldn't see coming. And I think this is a responsible manner to make sure that we can address our facilities needs and our buildings needs without having to issue debt and place that additional burden on the taxpayers. So this is a proposition. It's voted on the other side of the ballot. And we think it's a smart idea. And again, we did 10 years and we did $10 million. There's no plan right now of any application of funding to that. As we just illustrated earlier, right now we project that we're gonna need our money to get through the next couple of years in a difficult situation, but we can never foresee what's going to happen 4 or 5 years down. If all of a sudden state aid gets funded like it was imagined to have been, and we start receiving a significant amount of additional money, this gives us a venue that, even if it's only going to be a 1-year boost, the 1-year boosts are horrible on budgets, right? Because I'm only going to get it 1 year. It's like the $4 million emergency aid. We love getting it, but we hate losing it, and eventually you lose it. But this gives us an avenue that we might be able to smooth some of those revenues if we're ever fortunate enough to get in that situation. So just to recap, the board has a meeting on April 20th to vote on the BOCES budget and the Orange Ulster BOCES board member election. And then 2 weeks from today, on April 21st, we'll be bringing you our final package for hopefully your authorization after we have some discussion today. Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, a couple of points to highlight. One of the biggest unknowns right now is state aid going forward. In communication with Senator Larkin's office, I have to get close to the microphone so the presentation can hear. In communication with Senator Larkin's office, one of the disappointing areas of aid that was part of our package was there was no change in our foundation aid from the governor's original proposal. The governor's original proposal was a $26,000 increase in our foundation aid. Foundation aid is just that. It's the foundation of your aid package that's mostly based upon your enrollment and your wealth ratio. The explanation that was given to me was school districts that had a very large gap elimination adjustment, which we did. We had a $359,000 gap elimination adjustment. This year's budget fully eliminated the gap elimination adjustment for all school districts. So that $359,000 negative went to a positive. So we got $359,000 more in state aid because our GEA was eliminated. The way that the legislation was also written was if there was an increase in your foundation aid in the behind-the-scenes formula, but your gap elimination adjustment was greater than that increase, you would get the greater of the two. So we got the gap elimination adjustment, but no change in our foundation aid. That's good. It's $359,000. It would have been better on the other side of it because there would have been solid money in our foundation that wouldn't reduce any year. So certainly there's a strong legislative effort that we put out this year, and it did bear some fruit with some good numbers. We do appreciate Senator Larkin and Assemblyman Scartatos for that. We will have a new approach next year looking at restoring our ability to increase our foundation aid. The stories are out there wildly about how foundation aid was part of several lawsuits back in the 2007 through 9 school years, and those lawsuits actually were won by the litigants, and the state had to recalculate how they funded school districts. And they did that, and then came up with the GEA to take away aid that was promised through those lawsuits. So had we realized those true funds over the last period of time and going forward, we would have had substantially more money. That is the effort behind a lot of this. But we have to watch that. That's the piece of this that we have to watch very closely. So the bottom line is we've put together a package that we believe deals with our academics and looks at our long-term economic picture. The term that I've liked to use is we've tried to produce a soft landing with the Dynergy and Roaston power plant issues. And I think the chart that Patrick showed with where we are with our reserves really does show that. We're in the 2020-21 school year is where things softly land and start to go in the right direction as debt comes off and we continue on with fiscal management that is wise. We think that this one shot this year at dealing with our academic issues and readjusting some of our program is that, a one-shot issue. Going forward, we don't see any massive need to make any major adjustments to program. We will have to watch how our district grows up or down. We are currently contracted for a demographic study that is looking at all of our municipalities, looking at our growth, looking at building permits, looking at birth rates, death rates, and coming up with a study for us to show us if we're going to be experiencing or anticipating to experience any population growth. I know that there are some projects right now that are on the planning boards, on the precipice of the planning board that certainly may have some impact on that. So we are trying to be as diligent as possible to look at where might we see some growth. We do have 2 buildings right now, one that we're renting, elementary school renting, the Hudson Hills, and we have the current building that we're in right now that were schools. Obviously, the storied past of how this district downsized in space because of population. We also want to plan to see if there's ever a need for that in the near future. Those would be the only areas that we really would see as far as any growth. But we feel also very strongly that by dealing with some academic issues and helping this district return back to the glory before the power plant struggles, the economic struggles, to show that this is a great place to be, that has a strong academic program, that has strong products that come out of it from the academics, from the arts, and from the athletics. This is the right direction. As I had said at the last meeting that we talked about budget, the first question that a family asks a real estate agent is which school district. The second question is how much does the house cost? We want to make sure that that answer is Marlboro, great, I'm moving there. It's an important piece because that does lift property values and that lifts everybody up. It not only lifts up assessed values, it lifts up people's families. So that's, we think, the right direction on this. So without any further delay, it's time to hand it back to the Board of Education, answer any questions, and let's talk about the issues and concerns that you have regarding what we presented.
Mike, with using such large fund balance, what's that doing to us with the cap? That's my biggest concern, is we're up against this every year. It's a negative again. It's going to keep leaving us with this hole.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know, that
really the use of those, the fund balance and reserves has no impact on our cap calculation, so to speak, right? Because the cap calculation isn't based on, there's no component of that's based on a level of expenditures. So what our concern would be going forward is, obviously, reduction in levy every year is not sustainable. But I think what you look at this year, part of the reason why our cap number was so low is because the economy was essentially stagnant on what they're looking at. Our levy adjustment factors, the CPI was 0.12%. So, that multiplier effect is 1.0012. The regional growth factor was flat, 1.0000. So we had no growth opportunity in the levy strictly because the period of time they're looking at, and these things are delayed. So we're using data from last year to estimate what we're going to see next year, right? So because last year there was very little growth in the CPI, that means next year we have to deal with that. Next year the economy may be picking up, we may see inflation, but unfortunately we're straddled with that CPI number that we had to use earlier in the year.
Yeah, but if we only apply $2 million, you're telling me that the rest of that would be eaten up by the taxpayers and it wouldn't have any effect on the cap?
The amount of fund balance and reserves we allocate have no impact on the cap calculation. That's correct.
It's interesting. Let's explore where Frank is, because you and I share a very similar concern in this. And most of my thinking on it is a piece in my mind that I have to adjust, because it's pre-cap thinking of how we can decide what amount of fund balance and reserves we apply, which typically boards would do in August. When you look at where your rates come in, where your assessables come in, and you can make that adjustment. So you can establish a budget in May, but decide the tax rate in August based upon how much you want to apply. Under a tax cap environment, we're capped at what we can apply to the local taxpayer. So if there's a budget that gets set, there are only two ways to fund that. You hit the cap, and then you either have enough aid to cover the gap, or you have to pull out of the fund balance. The plan that was instituted when we started putting money in the bank was, we're going to need to hit the cap as many years as we possibly can, and the plan would be to take the money out of the bank to fill that gap until we can get some debt off the system and watch how our aid moves. So that was the plan that was put in place by putting the money in the bank. With the cap environment, August really gets decided now when we adopt a budget. No matter what we do come August, unless we say...
Two different answers.
No. Well, the only way that the reserves or fund balance would implicate us in our cap calculation is if we were reducing our levy because we were applying the reserves or fund balance. That would absolutely impact us going forward, because next year we would start with that reduced levy number. But we're saying right here is we're going to our cap. That's our cap.
But we're using fund balance to get there.
No. We're using
reserves,
fund balance and reserves to get to our total expenditure plan. But the cap is the cap, whether we apply reserves and fund balance or not. The only way we implicate the cap is if we reduced that 0.11, or that, if we said, okay, that $35,000 reduction is not enough, we want to make it $1 million reduction. Now we're implicating our cap calculation.
How do we make up the $4 million next year?
Well, it's only going to be $2 million, because, as I said, we're applying 4.3, but I expect to have $2 million left over at the end of the year. That's 96% of my expenditure.
Okay. But
So when you look at that reduction, so this year we had a $3.2 million hole, which is now only a $2 million hole because we saw a $1.2 million increase in aid. So the way we reduce that application of fund balance and reserves is through growth in aid and reduction in expenditures by breakage. We don't have any teacher retirements recorded in this because we haven't received any information on whether teachers are going to retire now. We expect there's going to be some retirements, but none of that number. So as we go forward, as we have retirements and we get breakage, that generates savings. As we see growth in state aid, I mean, we in 1 year went from a $3.2 million hole to a $2 million hole. That's significant.
Well,
We took over a third of that has evaporated already. Sure.
Not land rich anymore either.
$2.3 million reduction there, where we're applying 4.3, it's because we're going to have a $2 million refill of the account at the end of the school year.
That's the
Our
contingent.
hope is that we will be able to refill it with more because we find more and more savings throughout the year. We believe this year we've done a very good job, and at the end of this year we'll be able to do that too. The other way we can affect this is what happens with increases in state aid and what happens with the cap. We don't know what the cap calculation, what the cap multipliers will be for next year. This is the worst year to get a 0%, well, for us it's a slightly negative tax cap. If we could just have had a 2% tax cap, that would have been a different structure here.
Really, the plan is for us to, we're treading water while aid grows, expenses reduce, until we get to the point that we see massive debt drop off.
Right.
Like that's really our only options that
Now-
we have, unless we decimate the academic program.
One other element that we could, it would hurt us on the cap, and this would be a cap issue, would be if we were to take the budget down from 54 million, I'm just going to arbitrarily, to 52 million. Find $2 million worth of savings somewhere in our expenditure side, and we would see an adjustment in current year expenses. That's not going to help us next year going forward, just kind of kicking the can down the road. But I don't know that this community could live with $2 million less in program.
And that's all I'm saying. I'm looking at making sure that we are maximizing where we can get to under the law, because at a negative one, we need to be right at the ceiling because we can't sustain negatives.
That cap is to the dollar what our limit is,
Okay.
what I'm proposing on the levy. Absolutely
That's
to the
fine then,
dollar.
okay.
And I can't see
Let's say we're able to realize that building aid that was part of the chart that was produced in the newspapers. This number increases by that $700,000.
All the way across.
That's fine.
Right, so that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to be as conservative as we possibly can in the way we look at how we budget, and also very conservative in the sizes of the budgets too. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach.
Yeah, it's really, again, we've been looking at this, right, when you look at that chart from back in 2014, we've been planning on this since I got here, right? We knew that we had this fiscal revenue cliff that we were eventually going to hit. And that's part of why we have worked so hard to build our reserves and fund balance so that we can weather the storm until, as I said, hopefully by the time my kids are maybe in middle school, they're like, "Daddy, how was work?" I'm like, "It's boring." There's nothing going on.
It'll never be boring, Pat.
Yeah.
It's never boring. At the same time,
so far that's been true.
But Frank, and Joanne, I know you're coming in on this too, and I appreciate that. It's extraordinarily important to us that we maintain quality programming. So we don't want to just come in with an approach that looks at slash and burn. We want to maintain quality programming. And I honestly, that first slide that shows the two-pronged purpose of this budget is absolute. We've had a lot of discussion here regarding purpose and direction. So we're trying to put it all out there so that it's completely understood by the public. We are still going to have a bump next year. It's a factor that we don't have control over. A $15 million loss this year in assessable value because of that, it's the roasting plant. That's a lot of money.
Well, next year we have a projected decrease, so
not to go up.
the rate is a projected decrease for next year.
That was for Newburgh. Right, because roasting. Which, backwards, forwards?
Back some more, right? Back.
That one. That one.
Newburgh.
Marlboro and Plaque.
Oh, okay, it's just the Newburgh one.
That's
That's the other part of the parcel.
yeah, right now, Roaston represents 5.7% of the district's value. Once they drop below 5%, we can no
It's
longer.
the 18, 19 where we see
Right.
next to nothing.
That's
Roaston no longer is no
large
longer a large
parcel.
parcel, so we have to treat it differently under the tax. Certainly, we've also had some discussions, really preliminary, early discussions, about where the pilot is 4 or 5 years from now. I know that that's a discussion that's been had. We certainly want to be brought to the table. I did have a discussion with Senator Larkin, too, and he did introduce legislation, not because of me, but it was already put out there, to make sure that municipalities bring the school districts to the table. That's an important factor. I'm understanding we were not brought to the table initially with the Newburgh piece, so we need to be at that table.
Right.
Right. We need to be at that table.
And we made significant concessions with that. We were able to reduce it from 10 years to 5 years. I mean, there was a lot that we were able to influence by being a part of that pilot discussion.
I'm not concerned at all about what you were asking to add in to get us where we needed. I'm just concerned to make sure, numbers-wise, we are maximizing what the state's letting us do.
We are at.
And not have an issue, because that's a bigger concern.
We are at our.
Nobody wants an increase, but
Right.
we need to have sound programs, and as long as we're staying within that, I'm not concerned.
Okay.
Yep.
I do, again, I'm gonna say you raised the budget. My thing is, we're adding all these teachers and we're adding stipends. I have to be honest, the community, is not there yet. We're not there yet. We have people still struggling here in this community. There's things, like, to hand me this and say, this is our budget. I mean, before we used to do building by building. Where could we cut? Where couldn't we cut? Are there things in there that we could cut? Are there spending that we could cut? I mean, I have to be honest. You're asking me to vote on something, which is more money, paying a teacher $100,000. What is a skills teacher? I don't even know what that is. I mean,
That's all. When we look at $100,000, that's salary, that's FICA, that's TRS, that's health, that's welfare benefit payment. That's every aspect of what
and
it
I have
costs.
to tell you, this community, when they see that,
Well, I can tell you, if we took out every one of those positions, that would have no impact on what that tax levy is and what the tax rate increase is. It would still be exactly the same.
so what you're saying is if we take all this out, we're still going to end up with a $53 million, almost a $54 million budget.
Well, you would reduce that budget by $480,000, but the tax levy would not change, the tax rate would not change.
So the
We have
taxes
to
are
hit-
still taxes are still going up regardless of what we do. So in
Correct.
other words, there's nothing in this budget that we can go back and cut and see where we can save money to the taxpayers. We're adding, like I said, some of these, I cannot, I mean,
Because we're using $4.3 million of reserves and fund balance, you would have to cut over $4.3 million in expenses
that's
before you start to impact the levy and before it would have any impact on what the tax rate is for the taxpayers.
but we're using our fund balance.
We plan to use our fund balance.
Right, so my thing is, if we don't do this, or if we can find other ways to cut, we wouldn't have to use so much of the fund balance.
That is true, but.
$480,000. That's
Right.
correct.
It's just, I have to tell you, like I said, as long as I've been in this community, I'm looking at this budget, and I'm going to tell you right now, people in this community are not going to go for this. After we cut these positions a year ago, or 2 years ago, and then all of a sudden, we're bringing them back with the stipends and everything else. And
So we
like I
can
said-
talk about what a contingent budget would look like. In the budget itself, there's $67,500 worth of equipment purchases that would not be able to be made if we went to a contingent budget. Again, that would have no impact on the tax rate, that would have no impact on the levy amount. If we went to a contingent budget, the actual levy would increase from what we're proposing, potentially, to a frozen levy, so we would be able to add approximately $35,000 back to increase that, and then we would go from the 3.21 to the 3.32.
So in other words, what you're saying, Patrick, no matter what we do, so if we don't vote this budget in, you're going to raise the taxes anyway?
No,
Because that's the picture that I'm getting right now.
We can reduce the budget in two ways. we can reduce the budget across the board and not take as much from reserves, or we can reduce the levy. If we reduce the levy, that's going to have long-term implications on our ability to realize the long-term plan that we've put forth. If we don't hit the cap every single year going forward, it will not allow us to realize that soft landing. We have to participate in the process that is transferring the wealth from the large parcel to power plants to everybody else. That's part of that court-ordered process. It's moving that $600 million, 33%, whatever, from them to everyone else. We don't have a choice in that process.
And we've made massive
let me finish the
restructuring.
piece. That's something we have to participate in. So it's my recommendation that we hit the cap every year. This year, the cap is virtually zero. Nothing we can do about that. It's also my recommendation that we work on bolstering our academic program that we spent a lot of time talking about a month and a half ago or so, but have been really talking about it since last April, when we went through the process of bringing me to the school district. How do we improve the luster? How do we bring it back? This is how we do it. We have to address academic issues. You raised the issue about the sixth grade skills teacher. We don't have a skills reading-based teacher in the middle school.
So that's a
Period.
teacher.
We have to bring that skills teacher back in. It's not just be reading, it's going to be reading and math, which is why we're calling it a skills program. But we have children that need assistance so that they, number one, get on grade level, and number two, get on grade level so they can perform better, and also not necessarily jump into the track of special education. That will help us out in the long run as far as special education costs. As the board is aware, we made a massive restructuring in two areas within the school district that starts May 1st. Number one is a restructuring of how we're putting together our technology team to help us out with our $750,000 plan for next year, so that we can build a one-to-one program for 4 grades next school year. Every student in 4 grades, sometime in the later fall, once we have the funding in place and once we have the team fully functioning, we'll have a one-to-one initiative where every child will have a school district-provided computer from that grant money. That's one of our restructuring plans. The other one is substantially more academic on the short term, which is restructuring how our AIS program is working in the elementary school. Starting May 1st, we're taking our 9 AIS staff, 6 teachers, 3 teaching assistants. The 6 teachers are going to be aligned with each grade level, 1 on each grade level, and going to work as a team, as an integration specialist specifically for that grade. They're going to become curriculum experts for that grade level, and they're going to work in both math and ELA. The way they are right now is they're scattered throughout the building, an inefficient way of using that staff. The 3 TAs that are working in that program are no longer going to be working in AIS. They're shifting over to work in that technology team. So we can move some more staff to the high school, some more staff to the middle school, and really bolster up an instructional learning environment that focuses, or that's founded on technology. Our kids need to leave school with a strong technology background, not programming, which is a neat piece of this, but how do I use this tool? How do I use this tool, an iPad, to learn more? Because as soon as they leave our halls, that's what they're going to be expected in the work environment and in the collegial environment. We're not doing that right now. That's why we took quick action on building in our wireless system. Our high school wireless system was woefully inadequate. Our middle school one was not bad. Our elementary school one needed a lot of work. We now have one strong wireless system that we can just continue to grow and build. Kids are working in a wireless environment right now because of the work that this school board did and this administrative team did early on. Those are key components. And these are all those pieces, Joanne, that we spoke about back in early February as the plan of restructuring, as the plan of the program. This is my contribution in the discussion for the academic piece. Obviously, we all are participating also in the financial piece. So.
And the K through 5 special ed and the 6 through 8 special ed, what exactly are those?
This year?
What are they doing? Yes. What are they doing that, and also, like the art, the music, foreign language, those are stipends that we all took.
We can speak to that right now if you'd like.
Yeah, we took those out to
Yes.
save on the budget, and now
Yes.
we're putting them back in.
Yes.
I don't,
We have some structural issues of how we manage through our system. We have department chairs and coordinators in many areas. Subject areas, grade levels. The area of art, the area of music, and the area of special education and foreign language do not have any middle-level, teacher-level management positions. So they have, there's an absolute need there. This is in an order of priority. Let me finish. This is in an order of priority. Having a K-5 special education coordinator, having a 6 through 8 special education coordinator, essential for principal management when it comes to delivering IEP requirements, testing mods, and all of those factors that surround providing that program to children.
so those are teacher positions?
They are stipended positions that would go to a
For
teacher.
teachers.
It's like a department chair.
Okay,
Like
I don't understand why we need that. We've never had that before. To me, it's another expense.
Well, I respect your opinion on that, and
That-
that's, I understand, yep.
I mean, I understand that some other school districts have it, but we're not a big school district. We're a very small school district, and I mean, if that's the case, I'd like to see it broken down into each building. If we're doing K through 5, how many students are in there that are in special ed? 6 through 8, how many are in that building that we need this to be added on?
I respect your opinion on that.
I think one of the things that we may lose sight of
K through 12 is the art.
is that we were forced to make major cuts, and it was major cuts. We knew, all of us that were here at the time, that this is what we were going to try and do, but there were going to be major pains from it and issues that were going to arise. And I know I knew at some point there were going to be some things we needed to bring back to still be functioning.
Right.
We've gone through a lot. And the reality of it is, I think you've put together a really good plan. As long as we're staying at the cap and it's meeting what we've talked about all along, we should be supporting it because it's for the long-term health of the district. And if we don't start now, we're just going to continue to fall off, and everything we cut that's under we're not moving forward, we're moving backwards.
A substantial amount of discussion had been had at the administrative level to phase this in over a couple of years. A level of discussion was presented to this group that it depended upon whether we can make this work in year one. I have made it a priority that this can't wait. I'm absolutely serving at the pleasure of the Board of Education in your decision-making process to decide what's in, what's out. My job is to present to you the options. My job is to present to you the vision. My job is to present to you the long-term plan, academically and economically. It is absolutely this body's responsibility to give me direct direction. So by the way, one piece that is added to this chart that I didn't have in before, the lacrosse support, that's why I kind of centered it there. Right now there's a group of parents that does some fundraising for a portion of our costs for our shared lacrosse program between us and Highland. It's about $3,000. What we would like to do in this budget cycle is absorb that in our budget. There's a lot of work that goes in with that parent group to fundraise $3,000. We would like to add that to that. So I hadn't highlighted that before. I wanted to make sure you saw that that was in there too.
No offense, but that was one of the conditions of us joining Highland, was that's what they were doing. And again, like the 3 o'clock bus is back. Now we're going to add $12,000 in clubs. I don't mind adding some of the clubs. And the same thing, the K through 5, the 6 through 8. What exactly do they do? Do they talk to other teachers? Are they, I don't understand why we're adding all these back in and these positions that we've never had before. I mean, so.
Which ones? Can we answer the question?
The two special ed stipend positions, those are the team leader positions that were cut. At the elementary level, there's first grade team leader, kindergarten, second, every grade level, every department has a team leader. In the middle school, the same thing. We had cut the elementary and the special ed position that was in place within the structure. We kept the high school department chair. Over the past, I think it's now 3 years, without the department chairs at the middle and the elementary level, there are gaps in communication. That team leader was the liaison between myself, the building principal, and the rest of the department. They would hold department meetings, and they would convey information from the principal and myself to the entire team. When we had to cut positions.
Well, that's
So
what I'm saying. I mean, we still had to cut positions,
can
and
see
yet all of a sudden,
definite-
now all of a sudden, we seem to have all this money to bring them back.
in those, there's a severe loss with those positions. Just the testing that's happening this week and next week, for example, at the elementary and the middle school where there is no special ed coordinator, it's upon the principal to make sure accommodation rooms are accurate, that they double check with each individual teacher on specific accommodations rather than going to the department chair to then coordinate with everybody. It's a systematic approach that really makes it smoother and more appropriate so that we don't miss anything. You know, we can't expect building principals to know every testing accommodation for every child.
No,
That's
we're
what.
not, but I better
Most of
be
this,
quiet, because right
if
now
I'm
I'm-
correct, is because we got the gap elimination taken care of, most of this is being funded, in reality, by our increase in aid. And I don't want anybody to lose that fact, because it's, we have to. I can't stress enough, we need to stay at the cap. Being they gave us the increased aid, it allows us the opportunity to do this.
That's correct. That was one of the variables, that if we didn't have enough in aid, this chart would have been off.
Right. And my other thing is, we're still raising the taxes.
We're not
still-
raising, well, we're raising the taxes, but no matter what we do, no matter what we change, it's still gonna go up 3.12% or 3.21%.
Which I don't understand. I mean, I don't understand why.
Because
it's
that's
still
what the levy is. The levy is frozen at what it was from last year, and it's gonna be the same this
So
year as last year.
Joanne, let me help to explain it. We have a tax base, all of the properties in the town. That tax base is dropping by $15 million next year because of the Roaston plant.
Correct.
That $15 million has to be then spread amongst all of the taxpayers. That's happening regardless of what we do. The only way to affect that is to drop below the cap, which is the problem for us in the long term. There's no easier way to explain that.
Here's the easy way. We
I
have
just
$10.
can't, I just
We
can't
have
see
$10
spending all
that
this
we.
money on all these positions, I have to be honest, when we should be putting that money in a reserve.
I understand.
For-
When I see
I
the
understand
when
your
I saw
position.
the scores that you showed us, we should be spending this money.
I
In all
definitely
fairness,
agree with scores
Joanne,
of that.
hold on. In all fairness, I think it's important that we point out that what you're looking at is $60,000. And if you do the math, it's 1/1000th of 1% that we're arguing about. This is minuscule money we're talking about here. If you showed me 1.4 million, I'd be in the same boat. We're talking 60 grand.
No, it's too big.
I mean,
Well, like I said,
But
I know
60
people
grand,
are gonna
total-
sit there and see.
what are we gonna save on our tax
See
bill,
where you
15
put
cents a year?
$100,000 up?
Here's- let me-
And I've already gotten phone calls that say, you're hiring a teacher at $100,000?
But again, and therein is the inaccuracy. You're not hiring a teacher at $100,000. We have a brand new.
Step one teacher is about $50,000 now, $52,000, somewhere in that range. And then there's the associated benefits on top of that. Again, conservative budget. We could budget at 52, and then when the actual person comes on board, we're now working in a deficit. We budget a little bit higher to make
Every
sure.
teacher that we hire basically is a $100,000 teacher.
I assume
with their
every.
benefits.
I assume.
Not new teachers start next year.
I assume every teacher takes a family health plan, right? They're not all going to, but I have to budget that they're going to. This is every aspect. This is salary. This is federal income tax that we have to pay, FICA tax, TRS expense, health and welfare payment, health insurance payment. This is every aspect of what it costs for an employee. It's not
Their
just
salary's
their
not
salary.
$100,000.
The salary is just one component of what goes into that.
if I may,
think
Mike,
it should be
as I recall, I missed the last meeting, but the prior meetings that we had discussed the other positions, the $100,000 teacher in particular. Yep. And as I recall, when you put that page up, you said you were going to fund those positions within the current budget, which you've done, correctly?
Current levy.
No.
Within the current levy. Within the current levy.
We're not going to raise taxes to add those positions.
Correct.
The
Correct.
3.21% is coming whether we like it or not, whether you cut those positions or add them, correct?
Yes, with small caveat. The small caveat is the direction that I'm recommending, and I've heard from this body, is hit the cap. That's 3.21%.
Whether we
The
like it or
only
not.
way to reduce the 3.21% is to be under the cap on the levy side.
And
I'm not
long-term-
recommending that we do that. Long-term, that hurts us.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
If the true cap, if we had a true cap like the state has, where your budget went up 2%, then we could do a 1%. It would be much more than this and not even hit the cap. But we don't have a true cap.
$700,000 more. $35,000 is the levy. 1% is $350,000, 2%, and so on. So
I just don't see, to be honest with you, I don't see the issue. We have to get programmed, you've seen the scores, we have to get programmed to where it should be. And we can do this, it's not costing us anymore. Well, I don't understand the argument, to be honest with you. It's just, I thought we had all discussed the path forward. It seems like now we're trying to step backwards. I'm sorry. I think it's great.
okay.
What James said.
Yeah, we've been planning, you know, the financial impact for years. We knew this was coming. That's why we're in the position now that it doesn't break us, right? Because if we didn't have the reserves and fund balance built up, when you get to that 2021 school year, that could be negative. That means we're bankrupt. That means, you know.
Well, I think
mean,
it's also important that the residents know if we start reducing that levy, as we're discussing, long-term, it's going to hurt us worse than what we're doing.
Absolutely.
I
Because
don't
eventually then
think
you're
taking
going to have
money
to.
out of the reserve either,
But
because we don't know what's coming down the road.
we planned to take money out of reserves.
Right.
The only difference is we're taking about 300,000 or 400,000 more than we expected because our aid number was a little bit lower than we expected. But this is exactly how we planned to move forward.
And we're being conservative with the building aid, so.
Absolutely.
hopefully
Right.
it'll
We
work
could,
out better next year.
we could put $700,000 into the aid package, and you wouldn't even feel the $480,000 from, you'd see $700,000 less on what we're drawing from the reserves. That's not responsible budgeting. We don't know for certain, as we sit here today, that $700,000, or $700,000 and change, is going to be coming to fruition. When it does, it then gets factored into this formula after. That'll affect us next year, positively.
We hope for the best, we plan for the worst.
Right. Since Patrick and I began planning for this budget back in September and October, that was the statement that drove every single thing that he and I partnered on through this process. And then as we worked with our administrative team, every single one of them, we put together this. We challenged ourselves to deal with the academics and the economics. We had very long, drawn-out, very difficult conversations, pushing each other as to why we are where we are, academically and economically, and what can we do to affect it. This is what we can do to affect it. A proper investment with that $1 million of the Technology Bond Act, a Smart Schools Bond Act, a proper investment. You're going to see some really exciting stuff come out of that. It's real juicy to talk about children with one-to-one. It's really awesome to see it happening in classrooms when you see kids going from a non-wireless environment to a wireless environment. It was difficult for me to sit with the Student Senate. Is the Student Senate at the high school or the middle school?
High school.
Student Senate. And listen to kids on the verge of graduating saying they're a little concerned that they're leaving us not having a strong technology background because we didn't have the wireless environment for them. We just weren't able to invest in that over the last 3 years because of the decline. With that last 3 years worth of decline, things suffer. We had to bolster that program.
And
So
I understand that. I'm just very concerned, like I said, the budget's going up. Some of the teachers some of the positions I can agree with, some of the positions I can't agree with because we did take them out and it was a struggle and and we had to let them go. I have to tell you, it was heartbreaking to watch these people lose their job, and I don't want to see that happening, and we're not out of the woods yet.
Is my understanding that somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 people were laid off?
It was,
We're,
like I said,
we're looking at 3.
right, and we're adding the clubs back, which means there's...
That's a good
side
opportunity
clubs.
for children.
I'm not saying it's not.
Yeah.
I'm just being cautious because these are things that we took out. And then what happens when we only have 2 kids in that club? When you add the clubs back, are you going to make sure that there's an amount in numbers for those kids in the club? Or are we going to have like, because that's one of the reasons we got rid of some of the clubs, because they only had 3 kids in the club.
Our principals have a plan on which clubs they would like to start bringing back in. It's not just clubs, it's also intramurals. We want to bring in some sports opportunities for 6th graders and kids that can't participate in interscholastic sports. So Ryan and Deborah have been preparing for the eventual adoption, hopefully, of this, to bring those to you folks to approve those as positions. They're semi-prepared tonight to discuss that if you want, but it's a small piece to take it up
So
tonight.
Some of those clubs, will they be
But-
special ed clubs? Will be there something for
Special education
kids?
children can
And
join
for-
any club.
Well, wait. There was an issue with that too, because they weren't allowed to take the 3 o'clock bus home or the 4 o'clock bus, because they were supposedly needing. So my
Special
question
education
is,
children
if
can
we're going
join
to do
any
the clubs,
club.
will it be open to all the children, and will they be able to get on the buses?
Special education can join any club.
All right, well, I'd like to
I
see-
encourage them
would
to.
actually- would like
I
to
spend
see-
an
I would
awful lot of
actually
time
like
with our
to see
special
that
needs
go
children.
forward.
I'm sorry.
I would like to see that go forward. I really would, because it has always been an issue here with that, because I brought it up through the years.
Anyone that's experiencing an issue where they're facing discrimination and are unable to access those elements need to see me, please. I'll pave their path.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
We do have another presentation, which would be the final adoption. Our plan is to present this exact, the slides will be a little bit different, a little more condensed, but this is basically going to be presented to you on the 21st, and we will ask for you to approve that as our budget. That will then go in the newspaper and then go to the voters on May 17th. One last piece before we go to the public is April 20th. We have to vote on the BOCES budget, and we have to elect BOCES members. I know it's not on the, what's that? April 20th. Did I say April?
I thought it was,
April 20th.
I always thought it was on a Thursday.
No, it's a Wednesday this year. Next year, it's Thursday. It's April 20th. We had proposed a 9 o'clock in the morning meeting, but right now we only have 2 people committed to that. So if we have to, we have to have the vote that day. So if we can't get 4 people, we have to move that meeting to that night at 7:30. So do you want to have a discussion about 9 o'clock or 7:30 right now so we can get that advertised and out there?
I believe, I don't know if you were copied on email. If we can't get enough, I can do the 9. I'll have to do some schedule stuff, but I can make the 9. If you can get one more, let's do it at 9.
It's a 5-minute meeting.
Yeah.
Literally. Vote on a budget, vote on candidates that are uncontested seats. So, who do we have? Joanne? Frank? James?
And I think Susie said she was doing, but I'm not sure.
I think she was up in the air.
You have to do it at night.
We have to do it at night. Okay. We'll put
give-
the advertisement out for
Yeah,
7:30.
We'll give Susan another try. when
We'll
she
give her
gets
another
back.
try, yeah. Okay, great idea, because she would be the 4th. So Irene, can you help me remember to do that tomorrow? Thank you.
I want to
Okay,
give
I
her,
put
give her a
it to you.
day to get home and situated.
I put it to the board for,
If it's just him. Go ahead, Jim.
James Garofalo. I can have one statement. A lot was talked about the levy coming from the residents. It's a real estate land building tax, so it's really the residents and all the businesses.
Correct.
I want to make that clear. The other thing, you talked about the reducing the
You'd be building off a smaller number, and it's a cap calculator issue the following year. It's a complicated formula.
Whatever we end with would be our starting point the next year for growth. So obviously, if we end lower, we start lower, we finish lower. So if we set the cap, whatever our cap is set at this year is the basis for beginning the calculation for next year.
And it actually follows you
Correct.
all of those years.
Right,
Correct.
it compounds.
So it actually compounds
Right.
Correct.
continually throughout the
For perpetuity.
And that's unique to where we are because of the court revaluation. That's a unique piece of a gap that we have to fill. Remember, the concept behind what happened with the devaluation was you need to move the value of those properties to everyone else. We can't avoid that. It's happening, regardless of what we do expenditure-wise.
I think that can be hard for people to grasp. The last thing I'd like to say is, I play lacrosse, and I certainly push for the board to allow them to play lacrosse. The parents have been putting out money, and actually some of these players are probably also putting out more money to play during the winter. And this is actually a sport that you can not only carry through college, but you can do after college, and you can do it till you're as old as I am, even older, so that it's one of the few sports that actually can carry you through your whole life. So I think it's a very good sport to encourage kids to be doing.
Thank you.
I do have to tell you, I got to watch them play, which I never really watched them play before. I had to close my eyes.
That ball is a very hard ball.
It's a little bit more scarier than football, but I do have to tell you, I watched the kids, and they had a really good time, and they were really enjoying it. And what was nice is they played as a team, they did as a team, but like I said, when they got a little too close, I literally had to close my eyes. It's a little rougher than football as far as I'm concerned.
Actually, it's a lot safer and a lot rougher and a lot less rough than when I started playing, when we had wooden sticks that were like clubs, and you could get a lot more often and a lot harder than they allow now. The equipment is much safer that they play with, and it is, for the statistics that I've seen, actually safer than football and many other sports.
Oh, I'm sure it is, but when you're standing on the other side of the fence and you're watching them, it's like, but they do play.
I'm impressed that you still play, too.
All right.
I'm in.
All right, we're gonna, Mark?
Just a quick question. On the revenue side, and Patrick, maybe you can help me on this. It's 216, 17, estimated state aid is 13 million, right?
Which page is that?
The revenue page?
Right there.
This one?
Is it better to say, instead of estimated, that's the actual aid you're gonna get?
Well, we don't know that. That's what we're projected to receive.
Some of
New
it's
York.
expense-based aids, so you have to spend it to get it.
Usually that lags a bit, so their data is usually fairly accurate. So, but again, till I'm holding the check, I don't know that it's certain, right? No, that's what we got last year.
I'm sorry.
Right. So we knew we were going to have that $3.2 million hole. Luckily for us, that's been now reduced to a $2 million hole. Hopefully next year, it's $1 million hole, and then we can close that gap.
If the building aid comes in, it'll be a $1.3 million hole.
Correct.
Right.
The only other question I had was the line below 875,000 miscellaneous revenues.
Yes.
What is that made of?
That's a lot of other things. That's, right now, we have budgeted the revenue from leasing Hudson Hills, health and welfare payments that we bill out to other districts for non-resident children that attend the Hudson Hills Academy, special ed billing, facility use fees.
Interest income?
Interest income,
Albeit
admission fees.
small.
All the miscellaneous, smaller pieces that collect together like that.
All right. Moving on to item number 8 on the agenda, personnel recommendations. I understand there's some... You never raised your hand, John. I'm sorry.
Couple of things. One, I think, one thing about the cap, I think it's the hardest thing for people to understand, and it's taken me years to even conceptualize this, but I think the hardest thing that people grasp, and that somehow you got to figure out how to explain, is that it hurts us if we go under the cap. So logically, if you didn't make any of these expenditures, right, you could lower the budget, lower the levy. And you still get a tax rate from the reshift of the taxes. That's going to happen no matter what. But theoretically, you could lower the levy and go under the cap. However, what you're trying to explain, I think you're making good sense of it, but it's hard, it's not logical to work with that.
The cap's not logical, John.
But what'll happen is now next year, you're not allowed to get that levy, which means you either have to go a supermajority to go above it or take even more out of reserves to balance, and eventually we run out of it. So you're constantly making this balance to get us to what we know is going to be a constantly decreasing situation because of where we are, right?
Right.
That's the problem that people can't understand, is to Joanne's point. It's illogical, but it's the way this wacky system works between state funding, between education law, and I can't believe I'm actually agreeing and even saying this, because I've been arguing for 4 years, keep going down, keep going down.
We've come a long way, John.
And I think what's happened here in this presentation, Mike, that you did sort of show in the first one a few times ago, is that you guys have experienced some cost reductions, which has allowed us to have the 1.7 or $2 million surplus, which you're reinvesting almost, to use another word,
Correct.
to fund these things, stay under the cap, and we're going to have to keep taking out of the balance, whether it's 4 million or 3.8 million, you're going to have to keep taking that, right? So you got to tax for the $2 million surplus, put it back, take it back the next year, put it back in this cycle.
Right, and we're now not taxing for that surplus. We've built up a level where we're saying, okay, now it's the house money, so to speak. It's our money. We're not taxing you for the surplus. We're using all of our own money for the.
But staying at the same level relative.
Correct.
I don't know how you get that point across to the community.
Thank you.
This right here. This is the piece that we're trying to stay flat on. This should have a slow progression north if the cap was properly understood.
But
I'm actually going to ask Pat if at our next meeting, he can show you the formula that's used for calculating the cap
That's
and how
not gonna work.
convoluted it is.
No.
Maybe it's not even necessary, but
I've shown it previously, but we definitely could do that again.
I have to agree with John. And you're right, thank you for helping me out. You really need to explain it a lot better to this community, because even me looking at this, I'm getting more confused with it. I mean, it needs to be put down in simpler terms where people can more understand it. And John, like John just said, and it makes it easier to grab the concept of it.
I fully respect that. I wish it was simpler. We have tried to use as plain terminology as possible.
I mean, I could run a projection to show you the long term, and I've done that. I think we've looked at that.
We've done that.
We've shown you when you take a reduction in the cap, how that carries forward into perpetuity.
But we were accused of using scare tactics. I don't think that's a positive.
Right.
Right. Well, that was just so you understood.
Every 1%,
What community? This is mostly administrators here. The community seems to be in kind of a acquiescence now. All of a sudden, you used to fill the room in budget.
I remember.
We have 4 diehards that are always here. Perfect attendance.
okay.
We may be able to try and address something in our budget newsletter. Maybe
understand.
that's a piece that we have to try and.
We're trying to put a publication together with our annual budget newsletter that's in as plain a language as we possibly can use.
I've been coming to these meetings for 3-4 years, and I don't remember seeing numbers, academic numbers, that were shown to this level of issue in a few years. Now, I don't know what this is. I asked that question last time, and apparently it's not so sudden. There's been a trend in this direction, and it does tie to the timing of the budget over time once that happens, right?
Right.
So
It was a
looking at
shock to
those
the
numbers,
system.
it's alarming. You have such a disparity between kids at grade level and kids not at grade level. Regents exams were up in the top and barely passing. I forget the exact numbers, right? So to think that that's not something to address or to put lower priority on that would be a scary thing to do for the district. And I know I'm biased because I have children in elementary school that are going to have to, that would be directly affected by where this program goes. So be open about that. But I think if everyone should be alarmed at those numbers. There's an issue somewhere, and it looks like you're taking a shot at trying to address it. Good, you're staying within the cap as much as you can. There's a little bit of funding in there. So to me, you have to do it. What you really need to be looking at now, both as a board and the central administration, in my opinion, is how you define measurable results and how you track that on a quarterly basis, yearly basis going forward. Is it going to work? Is it working? Is it, and how do you go on top of that or build the momentum, right? That's where besides the money, it's always the money. It's tough right now in this community. It will continue to go based on what you guys have projected, obviously. But that, I think, has to be a major priority going forward. How do you measure success? How are you tracking against that measurement of success? And what adjustments are you making along the way?
John, we're committed to a longitudinal look, so yes.
Just keep that, my only suggestion would be for the community's sake, is you got to start seeing that.
Yep.
Because I personally am a little nervous about that. And I know there's a lot of variables, the state tests, the opt-outs, the Common Course changing again, all kinds of things are happening, right? But still, those are the variables, but some of those numbers and the questions I was asking are pointing to trending that's going in the wrong direction. And I know there's more we even could be doing with the tools we have. Students pointed this out to me when I was having a conversation with her and a teacher about my son and his test scores, that there's lots of reports and data and analytics that's available in the tools you have. It isn't really being utilized because there aren't people who are running these reports and building and giving the teachers tools to build action plans from, right? So there's certainly capabilities there that we're not taking advantage of. So I personally, and I know there's a lot of people in the community, would be supportive of putting back some of this academics. I find it interesting that we put back the modified sports about how to fight. And I'm not against sports. I think it was a good move. But as soon as you put back academics, people start challenging you, the cost of the teacher. Nobody challenges the cost of the coach or the couple of assistant coaches. And again, I'm not against sports. I'm not against it. But somehow we got to remember, academics is a priority. Really, it should be the top priority of the sports art and other things. I don't want to put a fight one against the other.
I get it.
That shouldn't be the way it should be. All of it's important, but come on, look at these numbers. We're going to argue about funding like this, which is probably, when you think about how much you're absorbing, equal to what we put in for the sports program.
John, this administrative team is hyper-focused on those two first points in the first slide. Academic excellence, relentless pursuit of excellence, and be very fiscally responsible with every single resource that you have. Hyper-focused, this entire group. And they can't say no to me, but they would challenge me, and that's what's good about this group. But that's the nature of what we've had discussions on. Hyper-focused, John, hyper-focused.
Pauline?
And I support it as well. I'm trying to get to that might not sound like it, but I do. I think it's important. I think it's important to seriously consider that and balance that priority against everything else.
I have 15 minutes to write a story. If I get this wrong, I want to hear from all of you. So please, if you help me very quickly. What is the actual cap? Tax levy limit. What is the actual number?
I'll give it to you.
I thought it was a negative.
It is. No, it's negative from last year. It's down from last year.
Very small negative.
Right, it's a negative of about 30,
Minus 11, minus .11.
Is that the actual tax levy limit? So actual dollars, what is it?
34,225,463.
Oh, you mean the dollar amount?
No,
The reduction,
the negative tax cap or the negative levy limit has a dollar value.
it's a reduction of $37,506 from last year. 37506.
It's on the tax levy updates.
0.11%. That's a yes. You're minimizing our
Here.
decrease. That's
Here it is right here.
slightly offensive.
A very complicated situation, and trying to explain, and I gotta do this, and I have a few minutes. Explain to people about how you have to always hit the cap, okay? Because you end up where, you start wherever you end up, okay? I got that. All right, but there's talk about changing this legislation, the formula. The lawmakers are working on it now, because otherwise people are gonna go crazy.
They should.
If that happens, then what happens to you guys?
Depends upon the legislation. There's no less than 5 or 10 bills up there about this, so it depends upon the outcome of the legislation.
Your gap is 3.2, and you funded it with 1.2.
Right. We knew we were losing 3.2 million in revenue. We picked up 1.2 million in extra aid. So now our fiscal whole is about $2 million.
The 700,000 more that was projected for you guys over what the governor
The building aid?
is not valid because you've seen the state make mistakes before. How do you know you're not gonna get this money?
We don't. But we don't know that we're going to get it. We don't see any valid basis for the increase in building aid payments. Have we ever not received what the actual aid number is? Yes, we've had variations.
And the 67 people who lost their employment here, that was June 2014?
The 13-14 school year was when the consolidation was.
And you're
So
proposing to bring back 3, essentially. Part-time jobs.
yeah, I don't know if they were part of the positions that were reduced or not, but we're actually, we're advocating for 3 additional positions. Correct. Sure. Thank you.
Pauline, Marlboro's on a great path. Marlboro's on a great path, academically and financially. Please make sure that's reflected in the article. All right.
Do you know what your readers would really like to hear about is this 2 consecutive years of a decrease in the tax levy. That's really good stuff.
No, I liked her statement. She goes to a lot of these, and we're doing it right. I liked it.
This whole situation with the kids and the testing, and your kids are not where you want them to be, everybody's got to have these, whatever, I wrote them down, whatever they call them, the intervention people. Everybody's got to have them. If you don't have them, you're not going to get any help.
Right.
So you kind of need them. I mean, there's no dollar value on that. Kids hate going to these classes. They feel stupid. Everybody points at them. You're going to intervention. But you know what? They need it. And if you don't get it, it's going to be a long run. You have to do it now. Sorry. I'm on a soapbox.
Thank you, Pauline. We'll take that as a quote. Thank you. Sir?
I just want to reiterate a statement that was made earlier, and that is, having good schools is extremely important to the value of the properties. Whether you have kids in school or not, if the school district goes down, it ruins basically everybody's value. So it's very important to maintain quality education. I'm a product of quality education. I very much believe in quality education. Even though I don't have a kid in school anymore, I'm certainly here to stay. Thank you.
We've talked a lot about the vicious cycle that you would run into if you allowed the school district to continue on a downward slide. So when people look for new houses, I had the opportunity a number of years ago when I was looking for a new job to look in different areas across the country and figure out where I want to go. The first thing I go to on Zillow is what's the school district look like? And if it's not a little green circle, I'm not interested in that area any longer. So these are the things that we've talked about, I think, a number of times. How do you address the program deficiencies while being mindful of the effect on the taxpayer? And I think that we've I think we've done a good job at trying to find that balance, and I think I understand where everybody comes from on the expenses and is it necessary, but at the same point, understanding that if you can't fill the houses because people ignore that yellow or that red circle on Zillow, that's a problem. So,
And if the taxes are too high, they're not gonna come here regardless of your education.
but comparatively to other towns, we're not that far
I'll
off.
tell a quick story that I think I've already told before, but my sister lived down at Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. Very, very high tax district. They went there specifically for the superb school. They knew exactly how much they were going to pay. When her second daughter graduated, it was just her and her husband. They sold their house and they moved out of that area. Another young family with young kids came into that area, and their taxes are outrageous, but people seek that out because it is such a superb school district. So there is some validity to concern with taxes, but there is also validity that good school districts draw people in.
Depending on the area that they live in, too, we have a lot of farms here. And a lot of people with farms and have been raised with farms and don't have the money like other people. So a lot of the homes that are here in Marlboro have been left empty.
And that's,
Picking up their tax, and the tax bill has to be picked up.
and that's the problem we're trying to solve. We're trying to make this, like Patrick says, to draw people in that aren't from here, they're from the outside. They'll come, they'll buy up those empty houses and help take the burden off the people that are still here.
I have no problem with the education part.
So we're going to move on to item number 8 now, personnel recommendations. I understand there's some changes to the sheet that we need to go over before we read the motion, so.
Yes, I do apologize, but Ms. Mealy communicated to me that I had released some of these one-to-one paraprofessional resolutions prematurely. So I'd like to table, if we could, Mr. Bell, item D, E, F, and G under the special and part-time Doris Palacios. So those 4 items need to be tabled.
So items D, E, F, G in the first section, special part-time, Doris Palacios under item G is tabled.
They're tabled.
They're tabled.
Tabled.
Present them to the board.
They're not on there.
Yeah, they're one-to-one paraprofessionals. We are using the contract language. Yep. For clarity.
Okay. So, using the revised personnel recommendations sheet, resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, approves the following personnel recommendations as presented. Motion for approval of personnel, Frank. Second, James. Discussion?
I have a question on the AIS Academy program. As part of the grant money.
AIS.
That's part of the grant, correct?
Yes.
Other discussion on personnel? Jeff?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Russell?
Yes.
Joanne? Myself, yes. Item number 9, resolve that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, approves and authorizes the board president to sign and end the agreement between Tuxedo Union Free School District, Tuxedo Park, New York 10987, and the Marlboro Central School District for health and welfare services for the 2015-16 school year at a rate of $1,455.67 per pupil for a total of $1,455.67. Motion for the approval of the health and welfare service contract with Tuxedo Union Free School District. James, second. Joanne. Discussion? Jeff?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Joanne? Russell?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Number 10, resolve the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, increases the 2015-16 budget by $1,560 for money received from the spring 2016 session of adult education receipts in support of the general expenses in the following codes as presented. Motion for approval of the budget increase. Frank, second. James, any discussion?
By including that adult ed expense now in the general fund, The only time you should see this type of activity, because this isn't the first time that you've seen this happen, this is happening because we didn't have it in the general fund this year, and we had to account for it in that fund. So the only time you should see that is if we generate revenue and expenses in excess of that 20,000.
Any other discussion on the budget increase? Jeff?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Joanne? Russell?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Resolve the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, accepts a donation of $3,180.75. The donator has requested that these funds be used for lacrosse for the 2015-16 school year. Motion for approval of the donation for lacrosse. Frank, second. Joanne, discussion. Jeff?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Joanne? Yes. Russell?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Number 12, resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, acknowledges the receipt of the Facilities Committee meetings for the meeting of March 3rd, 2016. Motion for approval of Facility Committee meeting for March 3rd. James, second. Jeff, discussion. Jeff?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Joanne? Yes. Russell?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Item number 13, resolve the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approves the memorandum of agreement with the Marlboro Faculty Association, collective bargaining agreement for July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2020. Motion for approval of the memorandum of agreement with the MFA. Frank, second. James, discussion. So just a quick little bit of history on this. For the last 9 months, we have been negotiating in good faith with the Marlboro Faculty Association, which is the teachers union, to come to an agreement on a new contract that would be effective on July 1st. On Monday? Last Monday. When was it? Oh. No, when did, on the 28th? Yes. During a collective bargaining session, we were able to come to a agreement with the union on a contract that will cover the period of July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2020. Do we have that sheet with the quick details? Or? Okay. So just a quick synopsis of some of the things that were accomplished. The MFA has agreed to a salary schedule that is as follows. In the first year of the agreement, they would take a 0.5% increase. And the second year would be a 1. Year number 3 would be a 1. Year number 4 would be a 1. And then in year number 5 would be a 1.5% increase. In addition to that, they have agreed to waive approximately $150,000 per year in their welfare trust contributions from the district. In addition, over the next 5 years, they have agreed to gradually increase their contribution to their health plan from currently 90%, 1% per year. Is that what it was?
At the end of the contract,
it would be at 85%. We're also able to get some language changes to the contract, which will allow us a little bit more freedom in the way that we deploy our resources. I think one of the things that everybody on the board was particularly pleased with is the fact that after sitting down and working together with them to come up with a mutually beneficial agreement, the actual savings on the contract pays for the increase in the contract. So we are about as close to net zero as we possibly could have been, which would have been the same as running Triborough for the next 5 years. So I think everybody...
Plus we get the health insurance for retirees.
Plus we get for future employees, we get a retirement contribution to their health insurance and introductory steps. We'll have a press release that'll go out that'll explain the whole thing. I'll give it to Mark and anybody else that would like to see it. It'll be published wherever. But a lot of good stuff happened.
They were in the morning?
Yep.
We'll put it out as a press release tomorrow morning.
The agreement will be on the website?
Yes.
Not until it's infused as a contract. And we can put the MOA in.
It should be. I mean, if we vote on it tonight, it should be. It's a public document from the public meeting.
Yes.
We can put it on the website.
It was ratified this afternoon by the union, so we are moving forward with that, and very pleased to have that one loose end tied up for the year. So any other discussion on the memorandum of agreement between the Marlboro School District and the MFA? Jeff?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
Russell?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Item number 14, the annual meeting appointments to 2015-16 vote election inspectors. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, authorizes the appointment of the following individuals to the listed position for the 2015-16 school year as presented. Motion for approval of annual meeting appointments. James, second. Jeff. Discussion? Jeff?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Joanne? Yes. Russell?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Is there any old business?
At our last board meeting, we had talked about permanent subs. So my question was, how many permanent subs are there per building?
At the last meeting, we discussed the issue of permanent subs. It was revealed to us that there are not necessarily a position called permanent sub. There are a handful of approved subs that have been instructed to report to a particular destination on a daily basis, knowing that the shortage of subs will require their presence there.
That would be permanent subs. So do we have 10 people coming in per day? Do we have 2 people coming in per building? Are we paying benefits to them?
We do not pay
Not
benefits.
paying benefits?
We don't, let's make sure we get the right terminology. We have daily per diem subs. Some of those subs we ask to come in every day, up to 4 days a week, to fill gaps we know we're gonna have. Every day we have unfilled spaces in all of our schools, so it's helping our principals to triage a difficult situation when they have a number of openings. One of the things that came out of last meeting was the idea to post more locally to get some applications. So since then, we have posted on Twitter, Facebook. We've created a small poster that's going to be going up in local businesses. And actually, it's already started to bear fruit. No pun intended from our part. This morning, there was a response to a Twitter ad that referred to the Twitter ad. So it's kind of neat that happened. So
I might also point out that the Facebook posting on the district's Facebook page was shared upwards of 15 times and then shared off of there another 15 times, and last I checked, it had reached over 2,500 people.
I know I shared it. So.
hopefully we'll get more people that will join our ranks of sub either.
So, because I know, one of my concerns was I know in New York State, so after so many hours, we have to provide benefits, but I think you just answered that. Full 4 hours, like 4 days a week. And my question was, why I was asking how many we have coming in per building daily, was because I was a little confused. Because I know at the last meeting we were like talking about 2 per building. So that's why
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but we'll get it for you.
because I mean, if we're having 10 people come in per building,
But we have, on a daily basis, many more than 10 people coming in subs. I don't know, I mean, I'll get you the number that you're asking for, I just don't have it right now, but
I'm getting it confused.
I'll get you the number of people that we have. You can't use the word permanent because that's a specific position that we hire people for. Our daily subs, we have a certain number that we ask to come in every day, 4 days a week. All right, I'll get you that number.
The other stuff, when somebody calls in sick, they call in sick.
2?
2 per building.
2 per building.
That's what I thought was fair. It wasn't.
I just didn't have it on my head.
Could probably bring in 5 per building and still be. Any other old business? Any new business? Any other items?
Just to remind the few people that are still here, the high school play is going on. Danny's not here because he's in it. 7 o'clock tomorrow night, and then Saturday it's 2 and 7, and then Sunday at 2. So.
And I apologize, I forgot to mention in my report, I absolutely loved Alice at Wonderland. Watching the middle school,
gosh.
2 6th grade leads, the future is bright in our arts program. I mean, these 2 girls were just
It was amazing.
wonderful. Trading back and forth to play Alice at the same time was such a cool way to do it. Great production. I'm looking forward to Fiddler tomorrow night, so thank you for reminding me.
Any questions, comments from the public? John? Teachers union. still have outstanding agreements, all the units.
Has the one that you have agreed to, is that rolled into the budget that we saw today? Those numbers are going to be...
Yes. They are included.
Okay. The question I forgot to ask before, Pat. Your chart about the reserves.
Yes.
And that progression. And then you also had the page about the capital reserve, which is there to put some, if you choose, some of that money that's extra every year into it.
Correct.
So is your number that reflects the ramp,
Right?
excuse me, the ramp down of the reserve, assume any money goes into the building reserve?
No. No.
So you have to balance that every year.
Yeah, that, we can't, I can't predict what we're going to see 7 years from now, right? So, right, right now, we don't have any immediate plans to start funding that. But, if we have some favorable aid years, we may get into a position sooner than later that we are in a position to put some money in.
That's really just a fund if you want to put money into it.
Correct.
So you could potentially have zero in that fund for 2 years.
Yeah, we could,
You so choose.
we could go 10 years and it could still be zero, and it just expires and that nothing happens. So.
Laser focus on where's the actual expenditures to be budgeted, and when you find those savings, figure out where to reapply them. Because now you understand you have to spend the money anyway to reach the cap. So you might as well put it-
Well, and we have. We've gotten,
So now you can reinvest in program, or you can reinvest in capital fund, and you got all those
right.
options. So I think it's a good idea.
The goal with that account is to prevent borrowing for smaller projects. Well, yeah, like sidewalks, not necessarily sidewalks, but, yeah. That guy left.
That's a different budget meeting.
That's on record,
James?
I'd like to say a few things about the safe routes to schools. Brian and Lindsay heard most of these and some of the members also. But there's a number of things in there that I don't necessarily agree with, and I want to bring to your attention because I think they're important. One of which is figure 5 shows a safe route to school going north on Route 9W, north of the elementary school. In fact, in the recommendations, they don't show any kind of improvements north of the elementary school. Clearly, this was something that was looked at in terms of the town master plan. It's also something that makes sense in terms of the overlay district that the town is putting in terms of commercial along Route 9W, because we want to have access for the residents to the commercial, but it also makes sense for the school, and therefore, I believe that it is appropriate that sidewalks and be looked at north of the school also, all the way to McLaughlin for the school district. And one of the recommendations that they have is for sidewalk on McLaughlin Drive going all the way down to Route 9W. They just have the people walking up it to the west instead of coming down to Route 9W. It seems to me to make a lot more sense to come down to Route 9W. On page 22, they talk about having a raised sidewalk on Young Avenue, crossing Young Avenue on the west side by the traffic signal, which doesn't make very much sense. There's no sidewalk on the other side, although certainly there should be. But when you have buses that are making those turns and they hit the raised sidewalk at an angle that's not good, where you really need the raised sidewalk is in the middle of the driveway where you go from the north parking lot into the school. There's already a crosswalk there. You're going to have a raised crosswalk. That would make the most sense because that's where you're going to slow up traffic. So
stopping. One of the things that I think is needed at the middle school, you have these steps, and I was long an advocate of putting making a one-way drive to the lower parking lot. But those steps are going to be challenging, and I think that one of the things you might want to think about is covering those. Not only would help the kids during the rainy weather, but it would also help with maintenance, removing the snow when there is, before the kids arrive. One of the things I long advocated was they do not block the intersection, and they special markings on the pavement on Route 9W near King Street to let traffic come in and go out. That would certainly help buses when they do come that way, although usually they don't go that way. But that's something that I've long advocated. I'm glad to see they actually put it in the plan because it's something that's needed. One of the other things that I'm very happy to see that they started putting in here was the idea of roundabouts. They call them traffic circles, but they really turn into a roundabout. They're very safe for pedestrians. I know as drivers you may not like them, but these things are efficient and safe for kids, so I encourage the school to encourage the town to put them in. The last thing I'd like to talk about is the idea of the facilitator. I don't like that idea that you put it on one person to be the facilitator. What you really need is what we had before, which is a committee. And yes, you may have a head of the committee, but you really need a lot of people pushing this in a lot of different directions because there's a lot of things that are involved, and you don't want it falling on one person who may get sick or moved or something like that. You want to keep it going, and the best way to keep it going is to have a great core of people working on these things. And I hope now this is done, and I'm going to come and look at the high school and give you some ideas on the high school on what to do. And maybe you can think about doing some of the simpler things before next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? John?
Accurate to say anything that's done on school property would have to be funded by the school district?
Yes.
Anything else at the town?
Mark? You raised your eyebrows. With that, we have no executive session scheduled for this evening after the earlier one, so motion to adjourn. Frank, second. Russell, discussion. All in favor? Any opposed?
I don't think his hand could go any faster. But here's at 6 o'clock.